Now we're going to talk about people and process. And when I was doing my PhD, I was very fortunate to engage with several leaders within the field of study that I was in. And at that time, I was in aviation and aerospace. And I identified what I call mentors, people that I respected, that I wanted to follow and learn from. And one of those individuals was Richard Branson. And the one thing that I learned in terms of the management style of Richard Branson, and it really surprised me when I first heard it, and I think it shocked a lot of the world, but now you hear it more commonly, is that people are your number one asset within an organization. And if you don't have successful people, happy people, then you can't be successful as an organization. And I was always led to believe, through my education, that it was the customer that was the most important, not the people that worked within that organization. And when I learned this and really took a deep dive into how important people are, I really recognized that that's true. Your number one asset are your people. But on the other side, they can also be your number one liability. So how do you take a liability and make that an asset? And it comes down to engaging with process. So great leaders elevate their people. A great leader will come into an organization, or maybe they've been promoted from within that organization, to recognize how important the power of the people is in terms of their ability, their skill set, their personality, their culture, and their climate. And if you're not familiar with the difference between culture and climate, culture is who are we? What do we do? Climate is the mood of that culture or the environment we are working with. So is it hostile? Is it happy? And the goal is to always have a happy environment because happy people are productive people. So here's a quote that I like to put out there every once in a while. Leaders don't build organizations, they build people who build organizations. And I firmly believe in that. So as the new president of the International Space University, I came into an environment in which essentially I didn't know anybody and they didn't know me, but a new president was coming in. Another new president for some of those individuals that have worked here for several years, 20 years, 30 years. They didn't know what to expect. They've experienced change, good and bad, through previous leadership. And one of the hardest challenges for me as a new president coming into this world was to show them that I believe that our number one asset is you, our people. I've also been hired to create a new vision to take our organization to the next level of growth. And with that, I created something called the Moonshot 2030 Strategic Plan, the most formal, detailed strategic plan that the organization has ever taken, recognizing what the trends, the challenges, the opportunities, and the strategies are around space. And as we move from the public sector of space into what we call the new space economy, which is very much focused on privatization and commercialization of space, the International Space University has to evolve with all of those new trends and challenges and be aware of what those opportunities are so that we can successfully execute on what those solutions are. And here we are. We're now doing that, slowly but surely. So we built a very large strategy that shows what we're going to look like in the year 2030, essentially 5 years into the future, and then we're reverse engineering by year and by quarter the different steps that we have to take to achieve the ultimate goal. One of our goals is to be a financially self-sustaining organization, meaning we're creating an island, we're making our own water, we're making our own food. At the same time, we have to strategically partner with the public and private sector around the world and create bridges of opportunity so that all of those stakeholders help support ISU as we move forward. But also, very importantly, we ask the question, how can we help you as an organization so that you can also help achieve success? And the power of that message when it's a two-way street and there's a win-win for the different stakeholders that are involved really does elevate an organization. It really does motivate the people, especially when they can see successes starting to happen. So again, people are your number one asset, but they can also be the number one liability. And it's important to make sure that the people are happy and there's a happy medium between the employer and the employee. And it's again coming down to the culture that we're creating, which then defines what kind of a climate that we are working in. Once the people part is all defined, then you can start to talk about process, which is really implementation. The implementation process of how you put steps together to achieve success, the long-term goal, but also the medium and the short-term goals, which are clearly defined. And in the world of the International Space University, our short-term goals are usually up to 12 months into the future. Our medium goals are usually 2 years into the future, and the long term is no more than 5 years into the future. And in some cases, we don't look beyond 3 years because the external world in which we operate changes so quickly that we have to adapt and be flexible within our strategic planning process as we move forward, which also means that our people also have to become more flexible, more entrepreneurial, more intrapreneurial as well, and focused on emerging technologies and being able to adapt all of these new changes into our organization and to do so at an accelerated pattern. We're in this age of mega disruption and mega acceleration, and our institution needs to be able to adapt to that, again, short, medium, and long term. And it comes down to the power of the people and the successful steps that relate to the process to be able to get us to the next level. Now let's briefly talk about change agents versus steady hands. So managers preserve structure versus leaders that challenge the status quo. One of my roles as the president of the International Space University is to always act as a leader, but always challenge the status quo. Why do we have to do what everybody else does? Why don't we do things differently, especially when we recognize a challenge that's ahead of us or a new opportunity that maybe others don't see in the same way? So as the president, one of my roles is to identify what those opportunities are and then work with the leadership team and the entire employee base of the organization to see how we can achieve change in a period of disruption. And the challenge with most organizations is that it's very difficult for employees to embrace change, to accept change, especially if there hasn't been change for several years. And this is a good thing and a bad thing, but people have to be able to come around because we live in a different world today than we did before. And one of my biggest challenges internally is showing that change can be good and quick change can be good. It's okay to disrupt, and there's positive disruption and negative disruption. But what it comes down to at the end of the day comes back to the power of the people. If the people are happy, you've got a great working culture and climate, then change is embraced a little bit more easily than those that typically would resist. And in many organizations, there's a formula. A third of your employees are what we call the cheerleaders. They're out there doing a great job and moving the organization forward. Then we have a third that really want to do it, and they may be more junior in their career, or maybe they haven't had supervision that was a mentorship type model. They want to embrace change, they want to make it happen, but they need to be empowered. They have to be led, they have to be authorized to do something. And then generally, in a lot of organizations, you have about a third what we call resistors. And those are the people that are never going to change, or they're going to be a little bit more challenging in terms of what that change looks like, which creates a much bigger burden on the organization because now you have to have more focus in terms of increased energy and resources on those individuals to help them understand why change is important. But in larger organizations, it's impossible to get everybody around the same table. But if you have 2/3 of that organization moving in the right direction, then you're generally going to be in pretty good shape, which is a comparable formula to most organizations in the public and private sectors. ISU transformation, we're in the middle of this right now, and we're taking extremely bold steps to be able to move forward with our Moonshot 2030 strategy. And again, our goal is to achieve financial sustainability. And in order to do that, I, as the president, have to be the visionary leader, but I have to rely on a leadership team and all of the employees from the bottom up to be able to take that vision and execute it successfully. So we're always going to have individuals that don't understand why they're being asked to do something, and they may agree, they may disagree with what that is. And the constant struggle as a leader is to always come up with a way to better communicate and show why this is so powerful, but then also show the successes and acknowledge the successes of the team, whether it's an individual or an entire department or unit or a small team of individuals that were tasked with something and they did it well. And make sure that you acknowledge that and give them the credibility for being able to accomplish that task. It's also important that when you fail, not to just let it go by. You have to acknowledge failure. So if you acknowledge the mistakes that are made and then back that up with why they were made and come up with a new strategy that will allow you to be more successful in the future so we don't repeat those mistakes, then that's a good thing. And I always say that everything needs a business plan, whether it's an individual, a team, a department, a unit within an organization. If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. And that must be understood by the entire population of the organization, that you have a roadmap, and the roadmap is going to take us from here to here. And we also have to account with flexibility that there's some off-ramps that will allow us to adjust to external threats or challenges that may be thrown our way. So think about your mission as an employee in your organization as driving a car. and you've been tasked to get from point A to point Z, and yet you know that the road isn't going to get there straight and narrow as you had hoped. So looking at that highway, where are the exit ramps that we have to take to circumnavigate some of the challenges that are being thrown in our direction that again allow us to get back on that highway so that we ultimately get to destination Z. Essentially, it's a business plan. It's your roadmap. It tells you the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And always remember, given the nature of this video that we're talking about today, how leadership and team management becomes the DNA or the root of that business plan or that strategy moving forward. Now let's talk briefly about emotional intelligence. So employees within an organization all have feelings. They all communicate a little bit differently, and it's very important as a leader, especially those that are leading teams, to be able to understand that when you communicate to an individual or to an entire team, what you're saying may be received a little bit differently on the other end. And it's so important for you as a leader to have emotional intelligence, meaning let's turn the tables around. And if I say something and I'm communicating a message, are the others on the other side of the table understanding what it is that I am saying? And in many cases, that doesn't happen. And you just assume that the message was understood. So being able to direct communication, but also receive communication, and how do I do it? Is it in writing? Is it verbally? Is it through some kind of a visual? Becomes extremely important in being able to understand the emotional intelligence of individuals, which also determines things like empathy. So do I feel empathy for that individual? Can I put myself in the circumstance that they are currently in, and as if I was putting myself in that body, to figure out what is it that they're going through, and then how can I help them as a leader to better support them so at the end of the day, everybody is achieving success. Self-awareness is also another topic that's very important. You as an individual portray yourself, whether it's physically, whether it's verbally, the different types of communications that you put out, the tone that you use, the words or the vocabulary that come out of your mouth. Your mannerisms become extremely important because others are observing and they're seeing you, they're watching, they're making interpretations about you. So who you are as an individual, how you act, how you communicate becomes extremely important, recognizing that your number one asset, the people around you, the employees of the organization, are paying attention. And you want to make sure that you are sending the right message. And that will also result in respect for you as a leader. And you need that respect by the team in order to be able to advance the mission. Adaptability is also very key. You as a leader, also you as a team member, have to be able to adapt to the changing environment, which I've already briefly touched on. But you have to look at the world in two ways. There's internal adaptation and external adaptation. So when something happens within the organization that results in change, how do I adapt to it? How do I make sure that I'm successful at the end of the day? And when something external happens, it could be a global pandemic. And many of you seeing this video today have lived through the COVID environment in which there was a global lockdown. And that external environment influenced what we do internally, and we had to adapt. We had to adjust. We had to create new strategies. We had to learn to be able to communicate in a completely different way and learn about empathy and how you use your number one asset, the people, to still be able to run a successful organization given a new change. And it wasn't an overnight change, it was something that lasted for quite some time. And in many ways, we're still recovering from that, which may have also defined the rest of the world in terms of the future of how we adapt to change. There are many lessons that we have learned from a global pandemic as an example. So always remember in this particular topic that people remember how you make them feel more than what you say. That's a very important line for you to memorize. Now let's talk about empowerment and control. Leaders create space for others to lead. So I'm a firm believer as a leader that you have to be able to encourage ownership, allow creativity to happen, which then builds the confidence of your team. Another business case that I learned from is Southwest Airlines that comes to the United States. Historically, it was considered the best airline business model that was ever created. Today, maybe not the same opinion because the company became so big over time that it lost its core function of why it originated. But Southwest Airlines was built on the idea that the employees of the organization were also the number one asset. And the great thing about that organization, which is a case study in many business schools around the world, The leaders always believed that if an employee at any level within the organization, from entry level to the highest level executive, had an idea based upon a challenge that they identified or a new opportunity, the leadership would turn around and allow that employee to take it to the next level. They would be embraced. They were given authorization to make it happen, and the leader's role was to figure out what kind of resources are needed to be able to support the successful execution of that new strategy that essentially would advance the company. So the culture and the climate of Southwest Airlines has traditionally been one of entrepreneurial, intrapreneurial, which means building the organization from within, but to be strategic and to feel that I have power and I'm embraced to make things happen. And if I have a good idea that advances the company to the next level, my leadership is going to support me and allow me to do it, and I will be rewarded, my team will be rewarded, and ultimately the organization will be rewarded at the same time. So that's what empowerment is. It's also important to study control. Control means I have control over something. I'm the one that's making something happen. And as a leader, you have control, but you also have to make sure that the people that you work with, whether it's your leadership team or those employees throughout the organization, have an understanding of what control means, because everybody has control of their individual piece within the organization, and then collectively as an organization, we all have control. The challenge is that your mission as an individual may be a little bit different than the mission of all of those throughout the organization. And the bigger the organization, well, the more control challenges that we have. But as a leader, one of your jobs is to figure out, what do I do in terms of my control measures, and then how do I define control among teams, departments, and units, individuals as an example, and in some cases, and maybe my customer, and allow the ownership to occur as long as it's advancing the mission of the organization at the end of the day, making sure that we continue to be creative, which is looking at the outside world to come up with new ideas that we can successfully embrace within the organization, which then results in instilling confidence throughout the entire organization, because people feel empowered to make great things happen and they're supported by leadership. And there's always a time and a place for that. What I'd like to do in terms of a closing thought is just briefly summarize leadership and team management. This is the type of content that we can do an entire series of lectures on, because leadership continues to change given the external environment in which we continue to adapt to. And as new things happen in our world, it also allows us to identify and secure new skill sets as a leader that makes my organization more productive at the end of the day. So leadership is relational, it's not positional. I define my relationships with my organization, including the people that I work with, the stakeholders that support my organization, and you'll quickly realize that the better the relationship is that you have within that network, then the better the communication comes, the more entrepreneurial people are, and the culture changes into a very positive environment in which people are happy to come to work. And you don't want people to say, oh my gosh, or thank goodness it's Friday. As a leader, you want your employers to say, oh my goodness, thank goodness it's Monday. They're excited and they want to come back to work. That's a positive culture. I look forward to every Monday because I love coming to work, knowing that I have a set of challenges on my desk every day, as does our team. But as a leader, I have an opportunity to address that with the team, because we all understand what our vision that we want to accomplish within the next 5 years is. And yes, we're going to have struggles along the way, but we all know what we're working towards. And when new challenges face us internally and externally, we address it, we come up with a plan, and we make sure that everybody has the skill set to be able to advance this. I'm a firm believer that if your people are your number one asset, you invest into them, you give them skills, and they have a toolbox, and they constantly build up the tools in that toolbox, knowing that they're probably going to leave your organization at some point in time. But when they leave your organization, they achieve success, and they're going to be the biggest brand ambassador for your organization when they go on to achieve the next level of success wherever they are. And they may even come back at some point with a new set of ideas and skills. But you create the foundation of the employee, the number one asset, and make sure that there's an effective leader in place, and you always give the skill set to your organization to become future leaders. So create a pathway, a career pathway of opportunity, so that your employees can achieve different levels of successes if they want to, and they can embrace it, and then you as the employer, as the leader, help them achieve their personal dreams at the end of the day. So a great leader lights the way even when the path is uncertain. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this video.